Blackmail was extreme in the sense that what he was asking people to do, some really degrading things, whether, simple things like licking a toilet bowl. And he would take it as far as he can to the point where on some communications with other suspects, other individuals of like mind, when he's talking about these victims, he didn't care whether they went, he said, I've got one who's about to kill themselves. He didn't care whether they did or not. Don't care they live or died, he said. In about 2015, we received intelligence on a website on the dark web, predominantly for people that liked a violent and nasty form of abuse to be seen, so child abuse. Often given the term hurtcore, where it's more about causing pain and suffering to somebody else, and people like to watch it, share it, take images of it. And on this particular site was an individual who was advertising that he wanted to give his daughter, who was about 7, a week of hell, and was asking for members of that group to provide ideas to do that. And to show that, his avatar was a young child holding a sign saying, I love SB with today's date. And SB stood for Scream Bitch. We believe the child was in the UK, and therefore an operation was set up to identify and locate that and safeguard that child. Seeing the child or the image, the pressure is on to try and locate, because all the times you haven't located that child, you worry that child's coming to harm. So when you go home, you're going home and you're thinking, should I be going home? Because that child could be at risk.
How did your operation continue from there? What did you do from that point?
From that point, we are looking at police records. We're searching for any other indicators on the photographs. The photograph anywhere, does the child recognise anything identified in the child photograph? Is she wearing a school uniform or not? Can we identify that? Anything that could identify that child, as well as trying to looking at the user, who was running under the username 666devil. So looking at all the posts that he had made, or I say he, that person had made, to see if there's anything that identifies them. And we didn't get anywhere for quite some time. Then another user on the site engaged with 666devil and basically gave away that we established they were the same person under the username Evil Mind. And that username identified or revealed that they referred to some pictures that they said they were responsible for from some years ago. Some very famous, some not famous pictures, but some well-known pictures in the dark web community that were originally posted on another site, and that site was called Hurt to the Core. And Hurt to the Core was a site that was taken down by the Americans in 2012, and they provided a number of usernames, and one of them was a username that they believed was in the UK, and he was called In the Garden. We tried at the time or the NTA and CEOP tried at the time to try and identify In the Garden, but to no avail. But In the Garden had posted a number of pictures of one particular victim that had caught the attention of the group and had got him some kudos or some real privileges within the group. And Evil Mind basically gave away the fact that that person had been in the garden and was responsible for those images. So we now had potentially 3 usernames that were the same person. We couldn't connect any of them together until we found a report from Gumtree, a mother had gone onto Gumtree looking for a doll for her child for Christmas. This doll was like a Cabbage Patch doll or something. It was something that was really, really wanted at the time, like you couldn't get anywhere. Our suspect was searching and found that advert and replied saying that they had that doll and could provide it, but they needed proof that it was going to a good home. And so the mother, thinking she's got what she wanted, sent the picture of her daughter to the subject. So he would get the mother to move from the online website onto their private email because he wanted to communicate better. And what he eventually said was, I know, could you, just to make sure it's not just any old picture, could you write on a piece of paper, I love SB and today's date? So, and she knew nothing what SB was, but SB is Screen Bitch. Within half an hour of that picture arriving, it's the avatar. When we went to Gumtree, we found the address of that communication, and we were able to identify the mother and the child, safeguard the child, and we got some addresses that she communicated with for our subject.
So how long did it take you to get to the point where you realised that the child in the photograph wasn't actually this perpetrator's daughter?
Several weeks. So a lot of pain and anguish going on in that time. Getting to the point where we identify the online marketplace, identify the email address of the victim, and then the address, because she gave the address, make contact. It took several weeks to get to that point, but we were extremely relieved when we arrived. The mother knew who we were when we turned up. She had been beside herself, wouldn't let her daughter outside the house for fear of this guy knowing where she lived and all that stuff. So really, really worried and really pleased to see us.
Can you tell me a bit about the way that this perpetrator was identifying victims and how they were kind of bringing them into their fold?
So he used a scattergun approach, and he would search online marketplaces for adverts from people that are looking for cash jobs, or one was 1A. So it could be someone looking for dog walking work or for babysitting work. Some people ignored him, some people engaged and told him where to go, and some people took it a bit further when he's asking for a backless photograph or just your top. And it'd be quite upfront. Don't, if you think I'm a pervert, please say I'm not. I'm Liz, I'm an artist. And some of these individuals were potentially vulnerable, looking for cash, bit of cash. What a 13-year-old person's going to turn down £200 quick cash for a backless photograph or a topless photograph? And they would do it. And the moment they'd done it is the moment that he's already done his research. He's found their Facebook accounts. He's found their parents' Facebook accounts. He's found where they live. He's found all this, and he threatens them that he will expose those photographs unless he gets more. And it gets worse and worse and worse and worse as he asks them to do more and more degrading things. He would look at other sites where there's vulnerability. So there was a site for anorexia nervosa sufferers. He was anywhere where he can look to try and manipulate somebody to do something that they don't want to do.
And how extreme did the blackmail become?
So blackmail was extreme in the sense that what he was asking people to do, some really degrading things, whether, simple things like licking a toilet bowl, writing stuff on your body, nasty stuff on your body, hanging items from your private parts, all sorts of stuff, amongst other really nasty stuff that were quite degrading. And these people are feeling they got nowhere to go because they're young, and they just think that their life has run away with them. And he would take it as far as he can to the point where on some communications with other suspects, other individuals of like mind, when he's talking about these victims, he didn't care whether they went, he said, I've got one who's about to kill themselves. He didn't care whether they did or not. Don't care if they live or died, he said.
And what was it like for you kind of leading this investigation? How did it feel to be hunting somebody that was such a prolific criminal?
Difficult and pressured. Everybody felt the pressure because well, all the while, as I said earlier, all the while that he is unidentified and not been stopped, you can only assume he is offending, and we can't see it because we aren't monitoring anything to see it. So we don't know who he's currently engaged in. You could have somebody that's about to do themselves harm, and that puts a lot of pressure on you to get it done. It's hard to walk away and do other stuff. I had to get my staff to go and do other stuff as well, just to give them a break from this relentless, because it's, you're going down rabbit holes that you thinking you've got an idea and you spend days on it and then it comes to nothing, and it can deflate you as you come back.
How do you keep going? What is it that kind of drives you in that moment when it is really tough?
To me, it's about, I look for the safeguarding as the win. So the win is not, it's not, and I have to go through some rubbish to get to that win, but I want to do that because I want the win at the end. And the win is safeguarding children and vulnerable people. So that is what drives me, because it's hard to accept how people could do that. It's hard for me to accept how people can do that. But for my officers who are looking at it day in, day out, it can be really hard. You can't help but think, have I not done something? There's something else I could have done. What have I missed? Who has he communicated out of our control? And how do you control somebody on the internet if you don't know who he is? The times of the post indicated he was likely to be in the UK or in the GMT line. At the time, there were 66 million people in the UK, 32 million of which were male over the age of 18. And he was one of those. So needle in the haystack. The crime scene, there was no crime scene, it's the internet. There's no forensics, there's no fingerprints, there's nothing. So you've got to try and find somebody who's doing that.
So when you're at that point where you've got that huge number of men in the UK to look for, as the senior investigative officer, what is your plan? How do you find this person?
So this was very much an international engagement as well. So we were working closely with Homeland Security Investigation in America, Australian Federal Police, Israeli National Police, Europol, and others, because the victims were worldwide. And so they were engaged and they provided experts. They helped with leads, they helped with inquiries, because some of the businesses will be based abroad, so they're happy with those. So it was very much, and they understood the aims and objectives of it and were just as keen as us to see a result. So some clues that you could look for. An example would be, what time of day did the post happen? Does that work out what type of job that person does, what hours of work they do? Is it always in the evening? And what time of evening it was? Because you're not like you're doing this in front of your colleagues. So, but again, when you're doing all this type of thing, as well as collecting data from everywhere, from all the email addresses that he'd been using, who else is that engaging to that recognise elsewhere, searching everywhere, always building up and trying to piece together a picture that might eventually lead to a true identification.
How long had the investigation been running at the point that you found this individual?
The investigation had been running for about 2.5 years. At that point, we received intelligence that identified that led to potentially the identification of an individual we believe to be a man called Matthew Falder, who was a 28-year-old geographic researcher at Birmingham University. He was a A-grade student, Cambridge alumni, and of well-to-do family, completely clean skin, not come to attention of law enforcement at all. Had a long-standing partner that wasn't living with the partner, but long-standing partner of many years. Really did not expect that. So my objectives then changed slightly. I have got to confirm that, for example, that the suspect who's been identified is in fact the guy behind the evil mind moniker. So for 3 months, the pressure is on for me to identify an opportunity to arrest and gain access to his devices that we believed he was using. So that's a full, what we would call a traditional covert investigation around the individual. And at any time, I would have to intervene if I thought someone was at risk. So then I'm having to look for assistance to try and find ways to observe his activities, both online and off. He was arrested at university, so we could get control of the devices. We didn't want to arrest him with the devices that we thought we was using in the same place in case he found some way to disable them. So he was arrested at university and by my officers, and I was back in the control room.
And what was his demeanour, what was his reaction as your team arrested him?
So, flustered, surprised, he stuttered a bit, quite shocked, and came out with the immortal line, "It sounds like the rap sheet from hell." I remember him describing to one of the officers in the car, and when asked how he was, he said, "Imagine you've got a juicy apple, and you bite into that apple, and in the apple is a worm." That's how I feel. So rotten to the core is what he's trying to say. Once he'd been interviewed, which he went no comment for nearly all of it, and then provided a prepared statement when he admitted to being the owner of the Evil Mind email address, which was what we needed. That's what I needed to show. He was the user of that email address. We were then able to charge him and remand him, which was the most important thing. I didn't want him going out and potentially causing harm to others. He was charged with 16 offences, which included blackmail, extortion, inciting child to commit sexual activity, amongst a number of other offences. He was then later charged with 188 offences. These included inciting the rape of a child, which involved the father raping his, I think it was a 2-year-old child. Blackmail, several cases of blackmail, paedophile material, forced labour, loads of inciting child to commit sexual offences. He then pleaded guilty to 137, 51 what we call lay on file. Now, lay on file means there were a number of offences where it was for the same incident, but 2 offences. He pleaded guilty to the worst of the 2, and so the least of the 2 was laid on file. So 137 offences were which he pleaded guilty to.
How significant was that charge in relation to your work and the other crimes you've investigated at the NCA?
So it took over half an hour to read the charges in court. It just showed the scale of his coercion and abuse that he was doing. He was sentenced to initially 32 years imprisonment. This was later reduced to 25 years by the Court of Appeal. He has to serve a minimum of 16 years in prison. The importance of the sentencing was it was the first time that the courts had recognised the impact of online offending had on victims, or the serious impact. The judge recognised that in some instances it can be as severe, if not more severe, than physical abuse.
And how many victims were you aware of that this person was blackmailing and coercing?
We believe in the end about 280 victims have been approached, contacted and engaged with, of which many of them had exchanged imagery. And over 49, I think, gave evidence in at court or provided a statement.
And how did you and your team feel when Matthew Falder was convicted?
Elated. Really, really happy for the victims. Really, really happy for. I was really happy for the staff. It is the biggest, I suppose, online manhunt, I suppose, that's been done. The reason why I talk about this case for a number of reasons. One is I didn't solve this case. My team did. They deserve all the credit that they have had in the past and even now for working so diligently and so hard for such a long period of time to get to that point, my staff. But also the victims that agreed to come forward, agreed to provide statements, and also all the victims. I couldn't have done it without them.
I couldn't get the image out of my vision. This very pale little blonde boy. And just however many seconds it was that I saw of that film, playing over and over